Thanks a lot for joining the session, guys. I'm Jay Simons. I'm with Amazon. We have a fabulous panel for you here today to talk about a subject that I'm a big fan and very passionate about. So we have Erik with Younity, Brian with ValueClick, Shailja with American Express, and Phil with Beachbody. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves and tell you who they are and what they do.
Thank you. My name is Brian Duke. I run business development for our platform and analytics services at Conversant Media, and you might formerly know us as ValueClick, Commission Junction, Datomi, a few other brands as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Shailja Gulati for American Express. I'm currently responsible for the implementation of our travel websites for the global markets. So focusing on this year, Argentina, Brazil, India, Russia, and a few others. So happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Bill Solar. I'm the website optimization manager for Beachbody. Might not be familiar with Beachbody. Probably know our brands like T25, P90X, all that good stuff. So we do a lot of testing over there.
Hi, my name is Erik. Caso. I'm co-founder and CEO of Younity. We're a consumer software company working to build the cloud into every device you own. No configuration, management, syncing, or storage.
Fabulous, thank you. Thank you. And just as a quick show of hands, do we have a lot of questions in general in the room? Show of hands, anyone that came in here with questions around this today? One. All right, okay, I guess we'll take our time going through this then. No, you'll have questions at the end. So let's sort of start off with just talking about what is absolutely working in the business today. What are you guys seeing a lot of success in?
From my perspective, and again, I work with lots of large-scale advertisers, and I think that programmatic media buying, I'm not sure how many people here actually have a lot of experience with that, but I think that it has the opportunity to work. I think that advertisers are learning at a very slow rate how to leverage data that's unique to them in order to create an asymmetry of data in an auction-based environment to give themselves a competitive advantage. I think it's still a progression from the fact of most brands, American Express is a great example, they sit on lots and lots of consumer data, and it's a real question on how do I activate that? How do I find those people online? How do I track them across the numerous devices that they leverage, iPads, iPhones, desktops, work and personal? And how do I provide consistent messaging across the board that's tailored directly to them, leveraging that data? So I think brands are starting to get there, and programmatic provides a really good vehicle, and it's still got some ways to go, but I think it's showing some promise.
Is everyone in the room familiar with programmatic buying? Awesome. Oh, there were some no's. If there were some no's, just give them the sort of the 30-second what it is.
Right. So if in the display advertising ecosystem, traditionally advertisers have gone through its inception. They wanted to purchase banner advertising. They would go to publishers directly. Then came the advent of aggregators such as ad networks, which ValueClick is part of that ecosystem. Today's landscape is very different in that publishers, that we saw some of which were in our last panel, Demand Media, Spend Media here in Los Angeles specifically. They offer opportunities to bid on advertising space in an auction, so very similar to like an eBay. Hundreds, thousands of users in real time have the opportunity to place a bid to show an anonymous user an ad, and how you, to that point, leverage data to make a decision on whether or not that's going to be profitable for your business. That's really ultimately the goal that advertisers are trying to get to. And it's tough, it's a challenge, and how you do that consistently in real time across devices is a big problem that we solve for.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, the same one. What's working? What are you seeing working?
I think from my experience at American Express before I was on the global side, I was focusing on the US website, which for a lot of card members, they didn't even know that we offered a travel website to our customers. And so the question was, what's the value that this website is bringing to the customer base? How do we get them engaged with the product, and how do we keep them coming back? So I think from my perspective, you're probably a little bit further along in how you've thought about your business. We're really at the baseline. Like, what is it going to take to get these guys to keep coming back and transacting with us? So it was really just starting simple. From the US side, what's working, what's not working? Do we know if images are working more than text copy in promoting travel? Are there areas of placement that we can monetize on the site and provide to some of our best partners? And one of the limitations that we found in updating our content was that because we were doing all of it in-house, our technology teams were not as fast as perhaps outsourcing it to other companies could be. So we actually, I started investigating external companies and tools, and I settled on Omniture's test and target tools. I don't know if anyone's had experience with it, but it's one of, I mean, if I could bring it home for my birthday gift, I would, because it's so good and it's so cheap. And what you can do is literally inbox placements on your page and tell them, you know what, I want you guys to sort of own that area, and I want to do some A/B testing on the site, which we've never been able to do at American Express before. And what that allowed us to really quickly understand is if we're promoting something like cruise, do the images of the cruise ships work better, or is it actually the text copy? And on the back end, we would get real-time results, and then we could also push the conversions or push the exposure rate based on what's working. So if we started to see the trending go that text is working more, we can say, you know what, do a 75-25 split and keep going. So we just started from the basics. So I know a lot of you guys are probably a little bit more advanced in your experiences within your individual businesses, but for us, it was really just starting from scratch. And I think utilizing Omniture's test and target tool at the time was only for Amex, it was only $95,000 for the year.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. But I think that's where we started, and from that we've been able to use the data and analytics to drive a more informed decision and really understand that even within lines of businesses, people react differently. So cruise elicits an idea, or text in our consumer's mind elicits the idea of a deal. So if you want to showcase a deal, the images make people think that it's fancy and expensive, but the text is like a travel zoo kind of format. Mm-hmm. So learning about things like that and continually testing within it has been like a real benefit for us.
Fabulous, thank you.
So I too live in the world of test and target. For us, really, I think what's working is, I mean, certainly quantitatively, you want to know page over page how you're converting and kind of how are your conversions tying into certain specific pages. Usually it's the landing page. But I think another big point of data for us is also the qualitative. So, I mean, if you're really getting at the consumer's wants and needs and reflecting that on page for someone, whether it be copy or images, that kind of thing, that's really traditionally what works in testing for us. And it's kind of it's not really a one-size-fits-all for a lot of websites. So you could even take two competitors, try the same exact treatment, and just because their traffic sources are kind of different, you can see very different results. So I don't have a kind of panacea for it.
So what we found, probably in the last several months, is that hyper-targeting is working really, really well for us. We build a consumer product that affects a lot of people. It's a big problem that, quite frankly, a lot of people have. But because it's a very broad product, it's very challenging to market something to everyone that's kind of vague. So we've moved towards segmentation of the messages that the product will deliver solutions for. We focus that on specific segments of our overall user base. We often attach that to brands. And what we'll see is what is generally a pretty good conversion rate on web to download. We see that go from good to unbelievable. So instead of really going after, this is what we do, these are all the things that you can fall in love with the product, we really need to find things that deeply resonate with specific people and specific problems they have. As soon as we started hyper-targeting these messages, even though they ignore maybe 95, 98% of what our products will do, we see that the conversion rates and the engagement post-conversion goes through the roof. So it's worked really, really well for us.
Great, and actually we'll keep the mic down there with you, Erik, and we'll bring it back. Just if you're able to share an example of something that maybe is not working, maybe something that was common practice, but you've learned over the last, say, 12 months or something that it just doesn't work and you've sort of moved away from it.
Yeah, I think what we found is, and this probably comes as no surprise to anybody, consumers tend to have a pretty short attention span. They fall out of love with products pretty quickly, and engagement long-term is something that's really, really challenging to maintain. So I think it's post-conversion, once you've got a new user, once you've got a customer, how do you keep them that way? And a lot of that is the conversations that you're having with them, the way that you're educating them, the way that you're really guiding them through the value proposition of your product, because it seems like they might connect with that because they've become a customer. That's really not always the case. Sometimes these are impulsive. There's something that someone told them that they ought to do, and maintaining that relationship can be really, really challenging. So I think having a plan to where you can maintain the conversation with your users, to where you can be focusing them towards new value propositions that they become aware of. The market right now is saturated with products covering all forms of solutions that people look for. So there's always something around the corner that's going to come out and possibly be better than what your product is, or simply have different marketing, or guide their attention away from what you're doing. So I would say long term, it's really, really important to make sure that you keep them aware of the relationship they have with you. If you're a mobile product, don't forget that there's a lot of other applications on the phone. If you're a website, don't forget that there's a lot of other ads that are coming in for other web properties. So this sort of chaos that is in front of every single consumer every single day while they're computing all day long is always going to be a distraction from them maintaining a relationship with your brand.
So I guess kind of similar to what Erik was just talking about, not really having a value proposition there. So if I put up a headline and it sounds like it's maybe attention grabbing, but it's not really getting to what's in it for the consumer. I would see a lot of that. As far as failure goes, I mean, most testing programs, I think about 80% of the tests fail. So 2 out of 10 are great. So I've seen a lot of failures. And the thing that's funny too is you'll actually see you might have multiple sites, and you can try something that's working on one of your sites. You go, oh, that's an automatic win. I'll just port it over here. It just doesn't happen that way. So that's kind of a lot of the failures. Are like, oh, I know this is going to be great, and then it just falls on its face.
Okay, so just because it works in one environment, it often doesn't translate into another environment.
No, I haven't tried anything that's truly best practice.
Okay, great.
I think similar to the two of you guys, what we're seeing also is that just throwing things in front of the user in the hopes that something will stick is not always the best strategy. So I reference the Amazon model all the time, because I think from my perspective that would be the holy grail. I have all these data points on my customer. I'd like to keep them engaged after they make a purchase on my site and come back in the future. But I need to make the experience more relevant to them and more valuable to them, so that they feel that I actually know who they are and what they might like. So from a travel perspective, I'd love to say if you've gone to Las Vegas, well then you might like to try out Macau or something else similar to that, and make the experience one that's a little bit more contextual than just throwing things up on the page and hoping to God that it sticks. So we're trying to get smarter about how we're targeting our customer base and using all the data points to connect the dots to market accordingly to them.
Amex Travel is awesome, by the way.
You get $10 for staying.
I love them. I'm a sucker for good service. So from the advertiser standpoint, in digital specifically, the biggest thing that's not working is this concept of attribution and how we assign credit to our various media vendors for conversion. It's a legacy accounting rule that's been in place for a really long time, and depending on your business model, you may value someone that introduces somebody to your brand, someone that moves them along the funnel, or someone that actually, was associated with them right at the point of conversion. So you see marketers spending all this time, and effort and money to try and sum up every single conversion that happens in their business to a very specific marketing event. And, that's just not the case. That's not the way the world works, obviously. And, I think that specifically that's, one of the things that, advertisers struggle with. Well, how do I value the incremental effect of ad exposure all along the sales process and then even beyond after I've bought? And that's a statistics conversation that gets pretty complicated, but advertisers are desperately looking for a way to move to something that's more scientific. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people, even some Fortune 100 brands I see, they're still stuck in this world of attribution, and they really want to get out of it. So helping them move beyond that is something I think can be a lot of benefit.
Yes, so we've got some some great companies in the space, Adometry, Convertro, who are right here in Santa Monica, all working on multi-channel attribution. And certainly something that I've seen, and I battle with advertisers on a regular basis. They want to assign last click attribution and not give any credit for everything that led up to that point. And that's just, in my mind, flawed marketing.
Yeah, and I use this example with a lot of my advertisers, and I say, okay, you have the opportunity to show an ad to two different people. One person is 10% likely to convert before they see an ad and 50% likely to convert after. The other is 80% and then moves to 90% after they see an ad. Who would you rather show an advertisement to? And the majority of people fail that test, and they say, I want to go after the people that are known and likely to convert. Sure, that's demand fulfillment. That's worth something for sure, but is it worth as much as moving someone from a 10% to a 50% likely to convert? Absolutely not. So how do you identify those people? And I always say, I was like, I hear these performance marketing metrics, CPA, CPC, and however else it is, and I use this toy example with my clients. I say, I tell you what, if you want to open up an ad slot on the checkout page of the confirmation page on your website, let me put an advertisement there, then I guarantee you it'll be the best performing CPA campaign in the history of man. It'll also be the worst causal incremental ad ever shown, but according to your accounting rule, it'll rock and roll. So it just depends on, you have to really kind of get them beyond that point.
Yeah, that's great.
I have a question. How important is it to have engaging content on your website, like comment boxes? Not only just tracking, social media trends. How important is it to engage with the user from a different standpoint?
I'm going to let the brand guys answer that question.
Well, we're a little limited just because Amex is now a bank holding company, so we don't love commentary on the sites because we'd have to monitor them, and if there's bad ones, then we get in a little bit of trouble. But what we're starting to do is layer in user-generated content in different ways. So, for example, TripAdvisor. We just launched in the US 2 months ago with TripAdvisor reviews on the site, and what we're doing is working through a program where we can actually identify if you happen to be an American Express card member who's also used our travel website, and there would be a different badging. So that's a way to sort of start to layer in the conversation, the dialogue with the customer base from a travel perspective. Now, from a brand or an enterprise perspective, we have Twitter accounts with social media outlets that are being utilized where there's a dialogue that's occurring, but we specifically have to be a little bit careful with what's presented on the site just because we have so many regulations and regulatory boards that are looking at us.
So you guys use a third party as a way
Yeah.
to interact?
Yeah, and so what's good about it is that the onus of the reviews and the quality of them, or PG, write-ups, is done with TripAdvisor. So they have to adhere to our standards, and we say you can't have like curse words on there, you can't have, you can have negative comments, but it has to be within a specific parameter. And then they help monitor and moderate that. And then we just pull in the reviews onto our site, display them, and then if they happen to be known as an Amex card member, we can just badge it accordingly. So hopefully we're adding value by saying, not only are customers booking with us, but now people just like you are booking with us also, and this is what they have to say about the product. So we're hoping that provides a little bit more weight to the reviews that we're showing on the site.
For us, we do have reviews of our products. So like X amount of people like T25 or like P90X, this kind of thing. But that's really more at the brand leadership level. I think for us, it's certainly social proof. So people go on there, it's kind of a confidence builder for them. Like, oh, okay, these people like this thing. Although I kind of argue that you're kind of constantly interacting with the person. And something I really found useful was to be a little bit more conversational at times, especially around sensitive questions. So there was a page that I was working on where we're asking the person for their social security number. Very sensitive subject. So before that, we just had two very kind of more conversational questions, like, oh, where do you work? And I forget what it was. We didn't collect information. It was really more to kind of get them at ease. So from my view, that's kind of how we use that. And it was pretty successful.
Testimonials, right, from people that have
Yes.
used it, and that's what you're showing on the site.
But it's more of like a star rating,
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. And they can't click into it. It's actually not something that our team even manages. We do have people that manage it and
Yeah.
kind of curate it.
So Billy, I have a question. you talked about testing, okay?
Yes.
How do you establish the baseline for what you're testing against? How do you testing means you have an expectation something is going to work a certain way, and you're seeing whether you come to, how do you set that expectation for one of your tests? I mean, are you talking traditional software testing? But this feels more like advertising and seeing whether it's effective. How do you establish that baseline to know whether it's working?
Oh, no, this is more traditional experimental design. So we have a control group, and then you'll have a treatment or several treatments in there.
I see.
And if you're collecting your control data, that's great, then you kind of know where things are. But there's a particular part in the site where I want this segment to convert more, I want them to opt into this thing, and we're looking at the control group versus my various treatments, or treatment, as it were.
Thank you.
Well, excuse me, as it relates to maybe both questions, as a consumer software brand, our users really don't like hearing too much from us. Consumer software is one of those things people want to look at. There's a lot of it out there, obviously, right? I mean, if we grab any phone in the room, there's probably several pages of apps on it. So we found that direct engagement with us is something that happens opportunistically. Something is wrong, okay? Or there's a question oftentimes in social media. So we have those channels. But otherwise, direct engagement, I think, from a brand perspective, we look at influencer campaigns. We look for the people that guide our potential users to tell them about how they're using the product. And we find that to be a lot more effective than us marketing something that a user should be doing. But separately from us as a brand, we find that cohort interaction is really, really important. So there are, perhaps I'm a user and I want to get somebody else to be a user. How do you sort of maximize that conversion? Because typically what you see is, there's an invite mechanism or some sort of share mechanism, and a lot of products are out there these days. And they're asynchronous. It either comes from us as a brand, meaning our Acme company emails you, right? Or potentially it comes from me, so that it's a direct email from me to you. Obviously, our interaction will be much better than a random brand that you might not be familiar with interacting with you. But sometimes you run into a lot of issues. How do we privately email different people? What if I invite 2 or 3 people? So how do we control a lot of these factors to make sure that we get the best of both worlds? And one of the ways that we've looked at doing something like that we're implementing right now is sort of balancing that. We can have larger scale viral communication from one user to many, but we're implementing a private communication channel within the app so that if I want to tell you something about why you should start using that to make it much more personal and to really increase the conversion rate of the message that you might get, what we'll do is we'll allow the 2 users to communicate with one another outside of our brand and make it so that it's something that's entirely private and separate. And as it relates to the testing question, I think a lot of this is taking any concept, a message, and going through a lot of A/B testing, right? There's lots of data out there, especially as it relates to email marketing, where all of us are looking for the best ways to communicate with potential users. Social media is a good one. The web is a good one. And all the data that we see still shows emails being the best. And oftentimes, you can dramatically affect conversion with an email just by simple changes, right? So A/B testing changes in the subject, imagery, right? Going from bullets to text, things like that. So you're constantly testing all of these parameters. That never really ends. You're doing that on a week-by-week basis. And the biggest thing that's going to affect the success of it is how big is the sample rate? How many people are you moving through the A and the B, looking at the data, choosing one element of each one of those, moving it to the next A and B, and you're always doing that forever. It never stops.
Awesome, thank you. Now, we talked a little bit about what works, what doesn't work. Can you share some tools that you are using successfully, maybe that you've discovered recently that you can share with the room?
Well, we're sort of an outlier. Our product is extremely cross-platform, so it's desktop software on Windows and Mac, it's mobile on iOS and soon Android. There's a website. Then there's also an entire proprietary cloud tier that we built. That is a nightmare, right? So it is one of these things where when you're looking at tools, you have a lot of them. And there's a lot of really, really good tools around data these days. On the web, we use Google Analytics, and mobile, we're using Flurry. We built a lot of homegrown stuff on our cloud tier because there's really nothing out there designed for that. I would say what works is to ensure that from the very beginning, when you're building a product, when you're building a company, realize data is as much a part of your product as any core value proposition that you're delivering to the end user. Data is how you will make every decision. There are so many products out there on the market that oftentimes the product that you're building might be the 8th or 9th or 10th iteration of something that already exists. It's not that common that what you're doing is really building the first of its kind. And many would often say that that's actually a really bad thing to do, because when you're pioneering a market, you're educating the world on what it is you do. And no one really likes doing that. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So make sure that you realize that to win in a market these days, with all of the competition out there, you have to design data into your product from the very beginning in the way that you use UX principles, or even something as simple as a login, where you can wireframe out a sort of map of how a user is going to get onboarded and find all of the fall-off points that you might lose that potential user. You have to do the same thing with all of the data in your product, whether it's determining virality, conversion, cohort analysis. All of these things are really, really critical. And by building that in the very beginning, you're going to have a much better chance of deciding what tools are relevant to you. While there's a lot of free tools out there, which is great, we all like free, oftentimes they're very limited. Changing them is very tricky. If you're not a highly technical company, maybe you don't want to use something that you have to customize a lot to get the data that you want. If you're very specialized, you might be forced into customization because a lot of the stock data that they're providing to you, that vendor is providing, is simply not relevant to what you do. So it's really important, I think, to look at from day one when you're building your product, when you're thinking, this is a great idea, we think a lot of people will be interested in this. Data is, at that very moment, a part of your discussion of what it is that you're designing.
Great, thank you. Hop on it.
It's a little bit off what you guys are talking about, but a lot of the data that you guys are using or gathering, how do you see the role of privacy, especially the more added, especially in news and everything else? How is that fitting into everything that you guys are doing, and how is that changing what you guys are doing?
Well, I work with a lot of financial companies, and so privacy is of the utmost concern. I work with tax filing companies. So, obviously there's always a concern around PII and things that we can track with a cookie. Mobile introduces a whole other, litany of issues in terms of privacy and the device IDs and the information we're capturing. So, it's an ongoing thing, right? And I think that, you've seen people like Mozilla who default their browsers to say, do not track. And, if the other browsers decide to go down that same road, advertisers would have to make a pretty serious pivot in how they're actually gathering data and targeting users. So it just depends. I think it's kind of back on the consumer to say, okay, if I don't want to be tracked, then you're going to expect your web experience to suck. Do I want to go to a publisher site to read my news or content, and it becomes one giant contextual ad that has absolutely no relevance to me? Probably not. So, I think the consumers, they may think nostalgically that it sounds like a good idea, but in reality, it's not. I never clear my cookies on my machine because I want to see relevant ads. Maybe I'm the exception and not the rule, but I want a brand to talk to me directly, and I want them to have a one-to-one conversation with me, and I want it to be ubiquitous across my phone, my tablet, my PC, my Mac. I want it to be the same. So.
It's actually an interesting question for the room. How many people in the room religiously clear the cookies out of computers? One. Yeah, so it sort of seems like the world is definitely shifting into that direction.
Sure.
Yeah, so to follow up, it just seems like people are giving up a lot more information, or basically not as focused on the privacy, although they know all these things that it's going to happen. But on the other hand, you're also getting a lot of stuff in the media that keeps concentrating on, who's accessing the information that you're providing, everything else. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you guys feel that the trend is, from your end of it, that people are going to keep providing information because they want to have these options available to them? Or do you guys see a shift from that?
I don't know. The brand guys could probably answer this better than I could. I don't know. I think it's to be determined. I'm not really sure. I can't really say one way or another how it's going to go. I think consumers are ultimately going to drive the behavior of the advertisers and publishers. If all of a sudden the world makes a shift and there's an outcry that you're collecting too much data and using it for your gain to target me and I feel like my privacy is violated, I mean, I think consumers will probably make that known. So, I don't know if you guys.
I think it's a fine balance of getting smarter about your customer, but also making them feel like you're not encroaching upon their personal space. So we have opt-outs every which way you turn on our sites across the brand and all of our communications with the customer. And I think we have to be really careful when we market to them to say, we know that you took a trip to Vegas with us. What about X, Y, and Z? Because then it starts to feel like perhaps you're overstepping your boundaries. So I think, to your point, it's a learning exercise. We have to do enough to make sure that we're not violating any legal restrictions or mandates, but we're going to keep testing into it to see what is that point where it becomes uncomfortable. Because there are some people that want it, like the Amazon model, and he gives me $5 every time I say Amazon. But like you get. I want someone to tell me what they would recommend for me based on my previous purchase, because I think it's useful and it's helpful. It takes some of the thinking out of it for me. Not everyone may feel that way, so we just have to kind of ease into it, I think, and just make sure that we're doing what's best for the majority of the customer base.
Just from our standpoint, we see less than 1% of people go down that path, saying, don't show me customized stuff. So the overwhelming majority of our hundreds of millions of customers are saying, use the data around what I'm doing and give me a tailored one-to-one experience. I don't want the same experience as everyone.
But I think part of that is also the company that's behind it.
Yeah.
So like Amazon and Apple, I think people will share more stuff with than maybe Google is kind of like taking it from you. And that's, I think, as opposed to like, I think it's the perception that the customer has. Now, whether or not that's actually what's going on or not is different. But I think the customers are providing information to different companies based on the relationship that they have with that company. And I do agree. I think if somebody's getting stuff from Amazon, they probably don't have as much issue with it as if they went shopping at some other site and you left something in your basket that you sure you don't want to check out with this thing.
Now, I have a question. How do you feel about it automatically being turned on and leaving it up to the consumer to turn off the data feed? Because some consumers are not technically savvy. They don't know what's happening. They just enjoy. But if they knew what was going on, how do you think it would have been affected? Like, what if Amazon automatically turns everything off and then lets the people turn it on? That's different than automatically on and then off.
It's like the opt-in versus
Opt-in or
opt-out,
opt-out.
right? And so opt-in is where you're protecting the customer's rights.
Yeah.
Say you are proactively taking an action to receive communication back from us based on your preferences. And then opt-out is, we assume that you want it until you tell us you don't. And the problem becomes, I think, if someone's not as tech savvy and you assume that they want it that way and then they don't, I feel like it only takes one person to really raise a stink and then everyone starts, putting out the fires.
Yeah.
So I think from to be cautious, which is we're a little bit more conservative in that approach, we'd probably say you have to opt in.
Yeah.
Unless what we can do sometimes if it's the service-based communication, then it's like you're allowed to just be free with that. Because we're saying you made a purchase with us and we're following up on that purchase. And so that's sort of like how we can kind of cover off on
But if you're doing the more opt-in by default, there's a lot of things that customer may not even know they could opt in to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more work on your end to basically get them to opt into something in the first place.
So one of the things that we have is like a newsletter that gives them information about any specials or deals that are going on. We can't sign them up for the newsletter because then that's taking their personal information, saying we know your email address and we're going to sign you up for this email newsletter until you tell us you don't want it anymore. And so we've done it. We said that has to be an opt-in process for us personally until they want to opt out of it. Yep.
Will you personalize the web experience and then thereafter you exchange emails?
I'm sorry?
You exchange emails, with the consumer.
Yeah. We don't, but
Well,
maybe consumers do.
and if you guys, for example, you go to the website and you like something, then you call the company and you have, live conversations. Do you see higher conversion rates?
After we engage with them
Yes.
over another communication vehicle
Yes.
or just any.
Yeah, just on one-to-one. I know that.
Yeah.
And when I call a company, I like to communicate with the person who's there.
Yep.
And that I'm a new user, I'm a new customer.
Yep.
So do you see higher conversion rates?
I mean, I think the more coverage from a service perspective that you can get. So if you can own the call-in channel and the walk-in channel and the click-in channel, like you're covering all of your bases. So you're creating this, sort of full circle service for the customer. And so, yes, we see that. If somebody starts on the web, usually they call in because they have a problem with what they're doing on the web and they need help, and then the customer representative talking to them and through it makes that a little bit of a better experience for them. I don't know if every company is as lucky to have it all in one place to close that loop, but we see it on our side. Sure. Thank you.
I know for us, people that abandon on the site, if we have the email address and then we re-engage with them again, those conversion rates are really ridiculously high.
Right.
If you can personalize that and kind of be clever with some of the subject lines and things like that. I think the trend one was like, your shopping cart misses you, this kind of a thing. So it was a little bit more playful, like, oh, I'll open this up. I remember I was at this site. I think too, if you can re-engage with the consumer and then personalize again. So if you can take their first name, say, hi, Bill, welcome back, or you made a great decision, this kind of a thing. If there's something in the email that you can pass over through the string that's not too sensitive, obviously you're not going to put their credit card number up there. Like, hey, we have your card. Things like that, just kind of buffer it a bit more, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay. They feel more comfortable, they've already been there, and it really, really helps.
Right.
So as people become, or they realize that this is what you guys are doing, like you change certain things, but it's still a mass email, how do you personalize it as people are realizing, okay, this is still spam in my eyes? Like, how do you adapt to that?
I'm not sure that's possible. This is probably the honest answer. I mean, look, when you're sending out emails to lots of people, you can't, customize. You can A/B test. Maybe you can even ABC, maybe ABCD, but you can't have 1,000 different versions of an email, or 10,000, or 100,000. So ultimately, I think you have to figure out what are your users want to hear about, right? I mean, you can't tell everyone everything. Even if you think, if I get you to hear a certain message, you're going to love it. So you have to spend a lot of time figuring out who is your target user, what do they like doing, what do they want to hear about. If you go maybe and talk about something really, really generic, and mind you, we're not an e-commerce company, we're a software company. We have to go and find specific things that we know large groups of our users want to hear about, because we can't get everyone, but maybe we can get a pretty good number of them. Then you have to really focus on what I was saying earlier, which is the hyper-targeting. What are the things that we can say most of the people in this room are really, really going to like? And how do we encapsulate that into a very concise message, something that is enjoyable, something that won't anger them? And even then, you're going to fail a lot, right? I mean, you're going to get people who are signing up for things, they want to get correspondence, they want to hear from you, and then they'll report you as spam, right? So I don't understand why you're communicating. Like, we'll have users share content with their friends. It's coming directly from them, and they get mad at us because their friend wants them, to look at a photo that they took. So at the end of the day, I'd say you can't really win all the time. If you're lucky, maybe you win most of the time. You just have to try and figure out who are the people that you're talking to and what do they want to hear about. And don't talk to them if they don't want to hear about it. Don't have the expectation that you're going to be able to get somebody to listen to something that they don't care about. That's education. I would leave that to others. Watch the data as it comes in, and then start seeing how can you angle into that conversation.
So I'd like to move on now to case studies. If you can share like a good case study or an example of where you've been able to use analytics and make smart data decisions, and it's been good.
So we capture a lot of data about usage, but also from a very anonymous standpoint. We really, in our case, we actually don't know who our users are. We have what's called a personal cloud. So we build a cloud out of your devices. Basically, we turn everything you own into a data center, right? And because we do it that way, we don't really have anything about our user. We don't have any files, we don't have any content or anything like that. But we wanted to capture a lot of data, so we take a lot of aggregated sort of statistics about people. One of the things that we saw in the last, I would say, 6 months is that the average amount of video content that a person creates went from more or less about 40-some-odd% of the total content that they own to almost 65%. Now this is all of the content a typical person will have across all of the devices. So the average person, at least in the US, has in their household a couple laptops, at least one desktop computer, and several mobile devices. So what we're able to glean from that is an enormous amount of video is getting created. And you can see this, I think, with a lot of empirical data. If anyone's gone to a concert lately, I mean, how many people have seen somebody, maybe a lot of people in the audience, with a phone recording the entire concert? And you look at that, it's like, what the hell are you going to do with like an hour and a half of this concert? I don't even know if you're watching it except through the screen of your phone. So, you see all this anecdotal evidence about what people are doing, and then you actually see a lot of hard data on the fact that video is getting created at an unbelievable pace. It's taking up the vast majority of storage on each person's computer. And it's blowing away photos, by the way. I mean, photos is growing at an anemic rate, whereas video is exploding right now. So we began entire campaigns focusing our roadmap and our marketing around video creation. We started looking at brands that we could talk to, work with, and attach ourselves to. So we're talking with GoPro and marketing specifically about things that GoPro users run into problems with. Like, I'm here and I want to talk about something I did where I shot video with the GoPro, and of course, all of it's back in my house. Right? So how do we enable access to that content? And we're seeing that is resulting in unbelievable conversion. We're getting those audiences to really evangelize what our product does. We're seeing conversations in social media go through the roof. We're seeing that work really, really well. And all of that is really driven by taking data, parsing out, looking at your users, tailoring your messages to a good part of the audience that we think is more or less 40 to 50% of our overall user base. So even though it's not all of our users, it's an incredibly voracious appetite that they have for this type of solution.
Awesome. Bill, if you could share some case study of something that's working well.
Sure. Let's see, most recently, actually, let me share something from a previous position where it really didn't work out well as well.
Okay.
Just to kind of deviate a bit, we worked with a third-party vendor where we were able to pull in a lot of attributes about people, so where they lived and how old they were, this kind of stuff. We did all these tremendous effort around landing pages where we kind of stylized it. Oh, you live in the Midwest, so we're going to show you this kind of a home and this kind of a thing, and people in this age bracket, and nothing worked. Trying to over and over again. I thought that was kind of funny. To kind of, the flip side of that, what I've seen really work well is, again, to get back into the customer. What are they responding to? And I think in my new position now, I've only been with the company about 2 months, we have study groups from all the videos that we have. So we have these really long commercials, and then we have the people like, what resonated with you, and this kind of thing. So we'll just take comments out. So really just listening to what the audience is tuned into, like, oh, I like that before and after picture, or this person really spoke to me. Okay, easy enough, I'll put that high up on the page, boom, big win. Also kind of trying to replicate the format of the show, but on the web in some ways. So it was actually something that was initiated before it started there. It was more of a long scrolling page. So, we've all seen the commercials at like 2 a.m., right? And how they go through and they pitch, and then there's this kind of rhythm to it. So we just kind of tried to replicate that on the website. It's a little counterintuitive to think, oh, I'm making this person scroll a ridiculously long amount of time, but it worked really well. So kind of running them back through that whole content, the whole format, if you will, and now it's just kind of playing around with that and adjusting that. So this has been working.
Great. Shailja, you have a case study for us?
I think I already talked about mine, but with regards to that uninsurance tool, but what I would say, which is important, I think, to think about is when you're looking at your own business, it's also good to look outside of your own industry. I think sometimes we get pigeonholed into looking at just our individual silo. So if there's someone that you want to emulate, don't think that it just happens to be within your space. So look outside of your immediate world and see if there's somebody out there that's doing it better. It might not be within your specific industry, but there's things that you can do to replicate that experience or replicate that the best in class practices that they're doing and bring it into your world. And I think when we started looking at redesigning our website, I started looking at like retail sites like Nordstrom's or Zappos and things like that. Zappos, we tried to emulate their customer service model, and Nordstrom's, I think, from a functionality perspective, is one of the best retail sites out there. So just look outside of your individual scope, because sometimes you get more inspiration from what other people are doing, and try to bring it into your own world if possible.
Right.
I work with a large online tax company, and we had a 2-year ongoing study. The hypothesis going in the beginning was that we're very wasteful in our spend, and we're spending money on people that were probably going to purchase our service in the first place. But I had no way to quantify that. So we looking at how the spend was generated over the course of the tax season in 2013, this company spent roughly 55 million just in digital, and incrementally, they only drove about 12 to 15 million in revenue out of that. So they lost about 30 some odd million dollars. That's a problem. But the problem is that they would make assumptions about who their target audience was by looking at who their historical customers were, and they would tell their media partners to go find those people out on the web. And again, from an incremental standpoint, which again, as a marketer, your only singular economically rational goal is to generate incremental revenue. So reconstructing some of the tactics, and on the other side of that, we also identified that they left about $20 million on the table for people that they never considered targeting in the first place because they didn't think they were part of their demographic, right? So we edited, we completely changed the tactics, changed media vendors, restructured the entire way the media was bought, and we were able to drive in 2014 about 20% more top line revenue growth, and we did it with about 75% of the money.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, so, and it's pretty consistent. It's not just finance. We've done it with travel companies. We've done it with gaming companies. We've done it with retailers. So when you start looking through the lens of incrementality and from a statistical standpoint, you realize that the world is very different than you imagined. And unfortunately, the commercial solutions that are available on the market to be able to analyze the data, they don't really do an adequate job, and it's a lot less about technology, and it's really more around talent and having qualified people that understand how to leverage big data and how to, more importantly, get big insights out of big data. So that's really kind of where we help clients build their internal analytics services by even helping them staff and place appropriate resources, but it's kind of a side work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks to the panelists. I think we're going to have a break now. There'll be some lunch. I'd encourage you, if you have any specific questions for any of the panelists, go up, see if you can get a few minutes, and encourage you guys to network. Thank you so much.
Yeah.